Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene was trending on Twitter again. When isn't she? This time after claiming her HIPAA rights were violated when she was asked by a reporter about being vaccinated against COVID-19.
Have you yourself gotten vaccinated, and do you disagree with the Republican whip?
Well, your first question is a violation of my HIPAA rights. You see, with HIPAA rights, we don't have to reveal our medical records, and that also involves our vaccine records.
All right, so is she right? HIPAA is the topic of Open and Shut this morning with our Justice Correspondent, Candace Kelley. Candace, good morning to you. I don't know. It's just, let me just catch my breath for a second, Candace.
I see you struggling there.
Sometimes, Sharon says things like, sometimes people trigger you. Okay, let me focus. Let's
you all right?
Let's teach people something right now. Yeah. Let's teach people something.
All right. Yeah, let's do it.
HIPAA, we hear about it all the time. It stands for the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So we hear people talking about it all the time. But what exactly is the law, Candace?
So in terms of what Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene said, she is incorrect. I mean, on a number of levels. First of all, HIPAA doesn't apply to journalists. Let's start there. So of course they can ask a question anytime they want. The First Amendment trumps that. We ask people about their health situations all the time, whether it's the president or anybody else. But when it comes to HIPAA, there's a certain group that it covers. So let's take a look at the group that HIPAA actually covers. It covers healthcare providers, it covers health plans, it covers healthcare clearinghouses, and it covers business associates, but not employers, all right? Not schools, actually. We talked about this the other day. These are the people who are not covered. And when we look at OSHA, for example, which helps keep people safe on the job, we always ask people about their medical situation. So if you're a truck driver and you have seizures all the time, we have to ask you that question because you can't drive the truck. We often will ask people what their vision is, right? We also often ask people if they smoke marijuana, whether it's medical marijuana or not. So there are not a lot of limitations when it comes to an employer keeping their workplace safe and keeping the employee safe. So that is the breakdown of HIPAA and who it covers. She was really speaking out of turn, and maybe she'll read up on the law in her free time.
Imagine that.
And there's some other things she needs to read up on, Candace, okay? And it's not the QAnon Bible. Let me ask you this, though. Can your employer legally mandate vaccines at work? And if so, are there exceptions?
Yes. So an employer can mandate a vaccine at work. However, there are exceptions. If there's a religious exception, or for some medical reason you cannot take the vaccine. The thing is, though, that you have to have accommodations that go along with that. So if they can't take the vaccine and they can't be at work because you may not want them there because you're trying to keep the rest of your employees together and safe, well, then you have to make accommodations for them to be at home or to work in an environment so that they can continue to work but still have their religious rights actually honored. It also can be part of a union negotiation issue. So depending upon what your union might say, you might want to check into that. If you have a union at your work, it might negotiate how those situations are handled, and that would include a vaccination or other medical conditions. And it's probably going to be a point of negotiation in the future for how we handle these people who may or may not want vaccination. So a lot to consider there, kind of on a case-by-case basis, but a union would be something you would look to if you have that at your work.
Yeah, Candace, we're hearing about these mandatory vaccinations at these colleges, and if you want to go here, you want to go into certain facilities or whatever, but then again, we also hear about, it's on the honor system. So we got fake vaccination cards out there right now. So is a company violating the law if they ask for proof of vaccination? And how do you really prove that you've been vaccinated?
So the proof is a different story, because we talked about this just this week in terms of a university in Indiana who, according to their state law, the attorney general said, listen, We can't ask you for the proof, but we can encourage you strongly in order to get it. So it's a state-by-state issue. We've seen an example of that happen where you could not ask for proof, but you encourage people to strongly get it. You can't force them. So this is really winding through the courts. And it's something that's not quite settled because all of this is unprecedented, but it's going to be on a case-by-case situation whether or not someone can actually show proof. Honor system is the way that we have to go so far in terms of universities, for example, and the employers would probably fall under that same record. If you do decide to give proof of vaccination, it is suffice it to say that those particular records, they are protected by HIPAA, but it's okay if they ask you to get the vaccination.
I don't know, Candace. I mean, the people I've worked with over my career, they eat each other's sandwiches out of the employee refrigerator, and college kids cheat on tests. So this honor system, I mean, we got to rethink that. But it's a tough one. Let me ask you about this, because I know we talked about this and you weighed in before, but last month a judge in Texas dismissed that case, 117 hospital workers who refused to get the mandated vaccination. What was the court's reasoning?
Well, the court said, listen, we know that you don't want this vaccination, but you work in a hospital. So for the greater good and the reasoning that you've given us, because they said, hey, listen, we feel like guinea pigs, we feel like test cases here, and we don't know if these vaccinations are safe. The judge in this case, she said, they are safe. That's just a lie, what you're saying. You're not a guinea pig. You work at a hospital, for goodness sakes. For the greater good, for the safety of yourself and for the people that you work with and serve, you have to take this vaccination, or you will stay suspended, which is what ultimately happened to those people who did not want to get on board. There were about 178 that were suspended overall. About 117 joined the lawsuit, and the judge said no. The other thing was that they compared this being like the doctors in the Holocaust and how they felt like they were one of those people.
Oh, stop it.
And that was just too extreme and offensive, I think, for the judge. And the judge said, no, get the vaccination so you can get a paycheck.
It just seems really confusing to me, because if you're already an employee, it almost seems like you can't force somebody to do something and put something in somebody's body if they don't want to have it. But if it's a new employee, you can make it mandatory. You can make it a requirement, right? I mean, like, are we getting to that point where you're almost grandfathered in if you're already employed by somebody? But if you're not, then if you want employment in this company, this is what you need to do?
It is what you need to do, except for those exceptions, religious or medical. Now, that opens up a whole door in terms of what this honor code. Am I really that religious where I can show you that it is a religious concern and that will get me out? Then we're going to have to go through those types of tests and those types of thresholds that people have to meet. I mean, who's religious and who's not? How do you prove that to your employer? It is a religious concern? No. So that does leave an out for people if they want to go that way. But, you know, you have to prove that you're religious. What does that look like? We don't know so far. But all of that is just kind of working its way, not only through the court system, but just at jobs in general. How do we do this? Everyone's working on it, but this isn't the end. We heard of that Texas case. Oh, it's going to come down. So we're going to see cases go all the way up to the Supreme Court, I'm sure, about this very issue, this vaccinations in general. We will hear more from this.
We got a lot of heathens out here finding religion all of a sudden. And we can't. Hey,
All of a sudden, right?
This is off topic because, you know, in my sports background, I always wanted to know this. I understand you have to tell your employer, but your employer doesn't necessarily have to tell anybody else. But when you're an athlete, you always hear about injury reports. And I always felt like that's violating HIPAA laws. But I understand why they do it because of Vegas. But is it a violation of a HIPAA law if I'm an athlete, I have an injury? Obviously, I got to tell my team that I have this injury. But if they go out and say what kind of injury I have, are they violating my rights?
They are not, according to the HIPAA law. Now, let's talk about other rights that you have that you might feel violated. And so if you feel violated in a way that you're not equally protected, or you feel like there's some type of Title VII concern that rises up as a result of that, you do have another avenue in order to take care of various violations that you think have fallen on you. But if you consider that the person, the sports team or the manager, the owner of the team is your employer, well, HIPAA does not cover this in terms of your employer. But again, if there are other concerns, you have other reasons to sue if you feel like you've been treated in a way that's disparaged or differently from somebody else in your situation. A lot of
they still gotta go tell my business. They still go tell your business. You got a groin pull.
Yeah, they are.
Oh, Mike Hill's out because he got a groin pull. I don't want people to know I got a groin pull.
There's a lot, Candace. This is why. 3 years of law school. How long did you have to go to law school? Because we're not willing to do all that, all these exceptions you carved out, and a lot of other stuff going on. We'll just keep asking you in open and shut. Our justice correspondent. Candace Kelley, thank you. We appreciate it.